Hello and welcome to the Premium Cigar Association International Policy Summit. This is an annual event that is critically important, especially in today's day and age where the international focus is very important to the association. We see a lot of growth. We've made several announcements and new initiatives that focus internationally. We've been participating in other stakeholder events from Intertabac to Pro Sabor and Pro Cigar. The Premium Cigar Association wants to be a global partner as well as a global resource. We are incredibly excited to partner with Quartz for Cigar World Dubai next year in November and facilitate discussions about trends and issues that are going not only in the United States and North America, but internationally. I'm incredibly grateful for our partners for the International Policy Summit this year. Ricardo from the Cigar Academy. Anytime there's a new idea and new initiative, Ricardo is the first one to raise his hand and participate. He's been a great guide as we learn as the association, as the Premium Cigar Association, about different areas of international focus that are important for the cigar industry. Ricardo and I spent some time in Spain this year and met with retailers and manufacturers and distributors and brokers and hosted a few different cigar events. And I'm incredibly grateful for Ricardo's insight, guidance, and friendship. Our other partner, Reinhard from Light 'em Up Lounge, is another person who is incredibly impactful for the international community. It's important to have partners such as Ricardo and Reinhard to give credence and credibility to our outreach internationally as the Premium Cigar Association and amplify the reach. Between the Cigar Academy and the Light 'em Up Lounge, you have institutions that are critically important to the advancement of the premium cigar sector, the media, as well as education. So I would like to really recognize and thank them for their participation and contribution to this annual event, as well as our individual speakers. I know that there'll be a spirited discussion, some topics that are important, and some fiery opinions. I wouldn't expect anything less from the Premium Cigar leadership. And as we delve into some of these issues of the day, I would ask that folks just keep an open mind as we navigate different policy concerns and share information. Continue to share information. When I set out working with Ryan and our team at the Premium Cigar Association several years ago of charting a new course and wanting to be working in areas beyond the United States and working with international partners, we talked about how information sharing was important. We had successful litigation in the United States that freed up the premium cigar sector. In many areas, we still have some challenges and hurdles to go through with that to this day, but we're in a better place than we found it. And I think that that's a mantra that we hope to empower and enlighten folks that view this content, that engage with the Premium Cigar Association internationally. And lastly, before I turn it over to the panelists to discuss the topics of the day, I would be remiss without promoting our critical event, the Super Bowl of the premium cigar sector in the United States, the PCA trade show, which will be hosted in New Orleans in 2025. I consider this a personal invitation to all of you that are retailers, manufacturers, brokers, industry partners, suppliers, and media. I hope to see you in New Orleans in April. Thank you.
Hello and welcome everybody to our panel discussion our industry expert panel where we want to focus on emerging cigar markets, new dynamics, and opportunities in the international cigar business. And what an exceptional league of gentlemen. What a great panel we have here today with icons of the industry. We have a truly international panel, of course, in light of today's topic. First, let me start by introducing the gentlemen we have here today with us. And I would like to start with Mr. Ernesto Perez-Carrillo, the next generation of the family legacy of the Perez-Carrillo family. Ernesto, many, many thanks for taking the time and joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
Next up, Christian Eiroa, joining us live from sunny and warm Miami. Thanks, Christian, for taking the time. I know you were just touring the international markets. You were just in Europe. I missed you by a couple of days, but here you are back home, and thank you very much for taking the time and to be here with us.
It's all mine. Thanks for doing
this. Claudio Sgroi, working independently as a consultant, also in Miami today. Claudio, welcome to the panel, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Reinhard. Always a pleasure.
And proudly representing the international markets, first joining us from Saarbrücken in Germany, Mr. Salih Dalay. Thank you very much for taking the time. Welcome, Salih.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
And all the way from Dubai, representing the Leaf Masters in Dubai, Reinhard. Thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you. A pleasure as always. Thank you.
Gentlemen, we want to talk a little bit about the ever-growing importance and impact of the international cigar markets today. And most certainly over the last couple of years, we've seen a tremendous dynamic and excitement in the international markets, with more and more manufacturers looking to grow their presence and their foothold in markets outside of the United States. Of course, with the ever-changing dynamics within the humidor and the changing representation of brands that we see in retailers and lounges in Europe, in the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia. There's a lot to unearth and a lot to discuss today. But I would like to start with you, Christian. For a very long time, you've been at the forefront of widespread international distribution with your brand, focusing on the international markets whilst also growing in the United States. What gave you the confidence early on to put particular emphasis and focus on development of these countries and the opportunities that you saw?
The first market we really started attacking back in the 1990s was Germany. Germany, we've always found, was the one that was the most open. And this goes back to probably 93, 94. And we did the Dortmund Fair a few times. And back then it was La Fontana cigars. And it really wasn't until the year 2000 that I think we felt the first crack, when we had Camacho Corojo at the time. And of course I was much younger, much more aggressive, 27, 28. And I decided to go and do a blind taste test against the Cuban cigars and Price Waterhouse Coopers. And I think it was the first time that we noticed that we could actually compete with the Cubans, because back then, of course, the Cubans always dominated the market. But it wasn't really until after we started CLE in about 2014, 2015, that we started getting traction and noticing that there was a much larger appetite for cigars from countries like Honduras and Dominican and Nicaragua. And we actually started seeing not only Germany, but then Austria, Switzerland, and other markets begin to open for us.
Looking back at those years, and you mentioned how things have changed for you personally, and of course all of that is reflected in the way you conduct your business. But looking back on that track record, how do you feel that the dynamics have changed, and what are some of the most significant evolutions that you see within those markets, and how people react to the products you're offering?
To me, it's very clear. Young people, 25 to 35, 40-year-olds, I think social media really started welcoming these guys. I remember walking into these stores at that time, and most guys at the store were over 55 years old and 60. I remember being at this one store in Switzerland, I won't mention the name, but they had a beautiful lounge, and we're sitting there doing a Camacho event, and this guy walked in. He must have been 27, 28 years old. And it was like the movies. The music stops. Everybody kind of looked at this guy. And the guy, he just felt so uncomfortable. I felt badly for him. And he walked right out. So the stores and the smoking public or cigar world made younger people a lot more welcome. And our messaging here in the U.S. started reaching people in different countries, mainly, like I said, social media. I think that for me, I don't know, Ernie, if you feel the same thing, but it's been mostly the younger guys in social media that have been the largest and most aggressive change.
Well,
Yeah.
Christian, what's interesting, just recently, you also sort of re-emphasized on that point by appointing a new team member with specific focus on international markets. Why that decision? Why now? And how do you think that having a separate employee focusing specifically on building those relationships will change the dynamics of your company and the representation in the international markets as well?
You know, we sit here and we make these cigars, and there's so many dreams and passion when we make these products, and it's really refreshing when we meet somebody that understands what you're doing and shares that kind of spirit and enthusiasm for a cigar. And so we got this kid, Mark Heitman, who has that enthusiasm. He's really good. He loves what he does, and he approaches everything very passionately, and it gives you energy. You know, he's a guy, you know, we'll be done with event 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, and then he keeps talking about what to do. And that's always a lot of fun. And it gives me energy. It's not that I'm old, man. I'm 52, but I've been in this business already it'll be 30 years next year. So young blood, it's refreshing to see that so many young guys are so attracted to this business, and we can keep it going for a much longer period of time.
Absolutely. Ernie, like Christian, you have also focused on the international markets very early on in the evolution of the brand, and you also recently put more impetus on developing those markets with an enlarging team and members of your team specifically focusing on the international markets. What's your perception?
Yeah, look, in our case, we had back orders for many years. So while we were still trying to, sell international, we were kind of restricted by our supply. I would say over the last 4 years, we've more or less doubled the capacity in our factory. And that's allowed us the opportunity to sell a lot more international. So we started, I would say, full force probably about 3 years ago. And I would say right now, international is about 30% of our business, which is, I think, pretty high compared to most companies. So for us, really first was having the supply. We wanted to make sure that, we didn't run into these issues where we ship, one of our distributors, they get traction with the product and then we can't ship them, reorders on time. So we've got that down packed now where, we're pretty much shipping almost just in time. And it's just been incredible. I mean, the response, I think we're in close to 70 countries now. And the response, particularly, I would say in Europe, the UK and Asia has been incredible. And then other markets are developing little by little.
Ernie, I would love to talk about the logistics, the raw material, the manufacturing aspect in a little moment. But Claudio, let me hand over the microphone to you for our opening round. In your current role as an independent consultant, your client base covers continents, different countries, different segments of the premium cigar industry. And you gained experience working in Italy, Switzerland, the Dominican Republic, the US, Nicaragua. So you're the definition of a true cosmopolitan. How do you compare the dynamics in different areas of the world, and where do you see potential for growth?
That's a very difficult question, because we should talk a little bit about the past first to see how we got into what I'm calling right now waves. Okay, I think the first big openings was early 2000 when Cubans they were the king of the markets, and not only Europe, but pretty much everywhere outside of the United States. So early 2000 they had a huge problem of quality control, so the quality of cigars went down. That was the first red light that switched off on in Europe. So you had the first big brands strengthening the presence in Europe because there were spaces that were getting open to other kind of cigars. Then you get the big markets like Spain, Germany, another couple in Europe that they were, as Christian said, very, very open news, like that. So we had the first wave. Then we had, the wave of the boom of the what they call the New World cigars. Okay, something that I don't like to call New World. I don't like to call extra Cubans. How they call in Christian is smiling because those words we did with that every day, saying, okay, we are not the New World. Yes, the entire Americas historically New Worlds, but not for cigars. Okay, so there have been another wave. The wave strengthening the presence in Europe because the established companies were already very, very strong in the United States. So they saw that opening. Intertobacco was a huge window for the European market. So they started coming into Europe. And another huge opportunity for the brands, it is the distribution in Europe or other countries completely different than the United States. When a brand is assuming all the cost of sales in the United States, and imagine how high it is because it's a huge market, what we do in Europe specifically is working with distributors, supporting distributors. So part of the cost of sales is absorbed by the distribution locally. So that was a model that, if you wanted, for many brands, it was the first time working with those, especially for small brands, right? And then they saw the market like Germany and other big markets, so they could do volumes, okay? Not compared to the United States, but country by country by country. Then at the end of the year, as Ernesto said, the export not to the United States to other countries is 30% of the turnover, which is amazing. So beside that, keep going with the disaster of Cuban cigars, keep going with the growth of specifically Honduras and the explosion of Nicaraguan cigars. So we had finally a portfolio to present to new smokers. Again, Christian said 25, 30, 35, very eager to try new things and not smoking the same things that were already in the markets. Okay. On the other side, put the new lifestyle in certain Asian countries, plus the distributors that worked in Europe for 30 years and then moved there. So you have a kind of another wave established now in Europe and now moving toward Asia. For not talking about the Emirates and all that part of the world, that completely luxury style, not completely, but part of the luxury style where cigars fits perfectly. So you have the biggest market of the world already established since decades. Okay, first wave in Europe and then strengthened in 2015, 16, and then now you have Asia. Okay, want to stop there and not talking about the challenges of those. So maybe you have other questions later, but that's my personal comment on that.
Thank you, and in fact, we will come back to the challenges as well, of course. Salih, quite literally, you wear many different hats in the premium cigar industry, as a retailer, as a distributor, but also as a brand owner and manufacturer of various types of cigar experiences. How do you look at the evolution of the international cigar community through the European lens?
So even though I'm Turkish, I'm way too long in Germany, and I'm super conservative about the emerging markets. So after 23 years in the business, my first distribution country was the US, the biggest market of them all. So that I think that speaks volumes, because for a small company, it's tough even to do your job right in Germany. That's a huge struggle. And like Christian said, social media helps. In Germany, it helps to be in the market for such a long time, 25 years ago when I started, there was no welcoming culture in the German retail market. So everybody was saying, yeah, let's see how long you can survive, and then perhaps we'll get back to your stuff, to your cigars. So Germany is still difficult. It's like, I still think it's a huge difference in people welcoming the cigar culture on social media, on podcasts, in lounges and everywhere. It's like I'm still waiting for the German market to click the way I feel in the United States. People know everything about cigars. They know the blends, the tobacco, the past, the future, everything. And you find very, very few people in Germany that are that deep into the cigar culture.
Do you think that that's primarily a consequence of the maturity of the market and how long the cigar culture has been growing? Or do you think this is more of a demographic or a cultural thing in general as to how the markets are different and how the consumer behavior is different also?
Yeah, I definitely think it's a cultural thing. It's like we have so many customers that say goodbye in October, see you next spring, because not nobody, but very few people smoke during the winter times here. Like they don't get together with friends to watch the game or do a barbecue or whatever. That part of the culture is really missing. And then whenever I'm at PCA and all the people come, the podcasts come, the YouTubers come and are very eager to know about new cigars and new brands, and you don't have that here. So I wish and I wait, and we do our very best with our social media and with our YouTube especially. And a lot of people at shows come to me and say, man, Salih, you're the reason why I started smoking. You were the first guy where I thought, okay, this is not just something for the bankers and for the rich guys. So to get it more blue color and everything, that's something which is happening. And like Christian said, there are younger people, and we try to provide a welcoming culture for younger people to get them started in the cigar culture.
Hey,
I certainly, Christian, please.
Yeah, one thing that I see happens is you pick any store here in the U.S., right? Pick whatever. There could be Ernie could be at that store this week, and 3 weeks later, Christian's at that store, and then a month and a half later, you have Lito Gomez is doing an event. So we bombard stores here. We just don't have that kind of travel schedule in Europe yet, but it will happen now with the PCA show moving the first quarter of the year, which leaves the rest of the year, which is the fat part of the sales in Europe. You're going to start seeing a lot more of manufacturers visiting Europe. And the more people hear stories, the more they're going to like it. Because in the U.S., they've heard every story and every manager. For example, today I just landed. I'm off to Orlando to do 2 more things. And these are employee trainings. And at the same time, they're doing one with AJ Fernandez this week. So we just bombard stores here. And that's not happening in Europe yet, but it will. And listen, we're only one of the first to hire an international guy. But I'm sure Carrillo eventually they'll hire somebody. And every company's going to start doing the same thing. So I wouldn't worry about it. Things are going to happen.
Great point, Christian. Right, the UAE, in fact, I would say all of the GCC countries and the wider Arab world has to be considered, one of the most dynamic, interesting, and steadily growing cigar markets. What, in your opinion, fuels that growth and makes this part of the world such an interesting nucleus of the cigar culture nowadays?
I'll go back to what Claudio said in terms of talking a bit about the history before we talk about what's happening and what's going to happen. So the GCC, predominantly 3 countries being Kuwait, Bahrain, and the UAE, have always been and had the representation for the Cuban cigars. So you had a lot of people that have been smoking Cuban cigars very much into their cigars. I remember my dad was a private banker. Whenever I used to go to Geneva with him, his gifts to all his clients were cigars. It was a big thing. And so there was that culture. We came in 2017 to a market that was predominantly Cuban, and it was very difficult to get into that market simply because everybody was looking at us as to what planet are we coming from. We tried cigars, whether you want to call them New World or what have you, and till today, we don't have a name to call them, but they are beautiful cigars, and that's what matters. And what we realized is the nucleus or the base is already there. And the best way to go about it is to focus on education, and definitely, as Christian said, to focus on the younger generation. My dad used to tell me, who was smoking till his 93rd year, was telling me, I'm at the age of 85 or 90, changing my palate is like a root canal to my brain. It's impossible to be done. So what we did was do a lot of education and build on the platform that was already there. And people were very receptive to this, okay? And what we realized is, as we got more brands, introduced more brands, and it helped that we were leading this initiative in our part of the world and being very focused. It wasn't diversified, being very focused. And eventually, what we saw is a conversion rate of up to 80 to 90% of some of the people that only used to smoke Cuban cigars before. So I think we live within a society that is open to trying new cigars, a society that already had a base of their preference and their enjoyment of tobacco, because, you know, people here are into shisha, are into something that they call medouar, which is like a small pipe, etc. So tobacco is very much in the culture, and they were always open to trying new things. And what really helped at the end of the day, I always use the example of somebody telling you, don't open that door, there's a dog out there that would bite you or whatever. But then people opened that door and went out and tried New World cigars and realized amazing flavor profiles, amazing aromas, amazing construction. And that word of mouth that started spreading with the education just helped the whole process. And today, we're very proud of where New World cigars are. And that does not in any way, shape, or form undermine other cigars or Cuban cigars. But people finally have realized through exposure, thanks again, as Christian said, to social media and the young generation, that there's an amazing product out there that you have to try. And that's exactly what's happening.
Reinhard, may I say something about this?
Of course, please.
10 years ago in Saigon, how many cigar shops did you have? 20 years ago in Italy, when I was working for a huge brand, my first job was putting humidors inside the tobacconist, the tobacco shop, to keep the cigars in a certain way. Okay? So if you wanted in that evolution of the distribution, there is the fact as well that finally people got organized for distribution. Okay? Because I don't know, 15 years ago in Mumbai, how many places at cigars. So there is this kind of a job that has been done in the last 20 years that put now those markets ready to receive cigars. It is not only the consumers or the smokers that were looking for cigars, but as well aware how. I remember 20 years ago, cigars were dry Europe. I mean, it was very difficult to find the humidor where you can trust to keep the cigars in certain conditions and you can enjoy them. So you had that problem of quality of certain cigars, plus the shops were not organized. Of course, the people that were not smoking like they are smoking today, which is since 5 years, the best time in history of cigars to smoke cigars. And another thing I want to mention was said my good friend Jose Blanco, instead of Claudio, he always called me Fabrizio since 20 years. I don't know why. One day said, and it's true, okay? The wine industry in the last 30 years did not a spectacular job, a stellar job on education. our fault, our mistake for 20 years was just putting in the mouth a cigar saying, this is a good cigar, smoke it. So we really started doing education not 30 years ago, not 20 years ago, but maybe 15 years ago, which is a very, very young job. I mean, it's before yesterday. So the people still need education, because not only we cannot go to a smoker saying, smoke this, is medium, it's a Connecticut wrapper, it's a tobacco from this, a Biso, Seco, it's good for you. The guy doesn't know. So we didn't do the job. Okay. Now we are doing pairings. We are partnering with spirits and wine. We are doing dinners. We are traveling. I remember when I developed the Mombacho at the United States. Okay. We are selling this. And I was already in 14 countries between Europe and Asia. Because I said a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit there. And then at the end of the year, I got my export. And I was going back in 2012, 3 times a year to Europe. Okay? When in 2015, everybody woke up and said, okay, let's go to Europe and attack that. So there is that 2-3 things that helped a lot. And hopefully, finally, we changed our mindset. Not only selling cigars, because guys, it's not a hobby. It's not only passion. I have my son that goes to school, gotta pay the bill. But beside that, our passion moved toward education. Okay, we opened the doors of the factories with cigar festivals. We organized the groups bringing into the countries and visiting the factories. So that education spread out not only in the United States, but everywhere in the world. Okay, Christian, he speaks even Italian. I saw him a couple of times in Italy, happy, talking about education, not only talking about the brand that he makes, what I did before. So that has been a key that changed the way we export cigars, not only to the United States, but to other countries.
Yeah, I would say one thing we talk a lot about internally is the difference between the sell-in and the sell-out. And, we found, obviously, with the shortage of Cuban cigars, a lot of distributors, a lot of countries, they would place these huge orders, which, at first, felt great. But then those cigars actually have to work their way through the system. And the sell-out piece of it is definitely, it's very important. And there's a lot of brands out there. And like Claudio said, the education is key. And then also, explain to the end consumer how your brand is differentiated.
Salih, there's a couple of very important and interesting aspects. The educational component, social media was mentioned. Christian made an excellent point about the physical presence of the brand owners or manufacturers themselves in the international markets. But we also know that there's no one-fits-all methodology or approach that's equally suitable or relevant for all countries internationally. Salih, what do you think brands need to be better at in order to be successful in Germany, in Europe on a larger scale, the Middle East and beyond?
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy. It's like I talked to Christian, to Skip, to everybody that comes to Germany, Jonathan, Drew, everybody asked the same question, and it's like to show the German very conservative customer the people behind the brands, the culture, and to be present. It's like even if you have a very small event with like 10, 20 people, we have loyal customers for very small brands where the owner was here or dedicated time to come every year. And that gives the customer a personal experience that is not like anything else. So that's the thing. You have to come over, bring the time. That's the key. I mean, and then of course it helps to have real brands, real people real knowledge, and like there are people like I won't mention names, but they do so much for the culture, and we have a product that's not comparable with a lot of other things, perhaps the liquor and wine and some food aspects, but our product is so unique. It has to be explained, it has to be shown, it has to be smoked, and we have so many great people surrounding this business. For me, that's key, and that's the only way. And then people that has been to events, they will communicate, they will multiply, and that's the only way that I see.
No, we've definitely experienced that. The importance of events and getting all the smokers together and the hearse that happen. And we've been lucky because a lot of people, by being positioned in a place like the GCC or predominantly Dubai, even in Qatar and now definitely in Saudi, people want to come and visit these cities or these countries. And so we've had people like from Oliva coming in, Aladino, etc., a lot of different brands. And their visits, going back to Christian's comment, become very pivotal and very important in making the smokers understand the brands, the uniqueness of each and every brand, and meeting the people behind those brands.
Salih, I had one brief follow-up question for you, given that you work both the retail front, but you're also behind the scenes brand owner / manufacturer. How much do these two sides inspire you, sort of vice versa? How much do you learn as a manufacturer through your retail experience, and how much does your experience as a long-term retailer and a very successful one impact how you do things on a brand / manufacturing level?
I think it's very helpful, and that's also a unique position. And but at the end of the day, you have to do what motivates you, what drives you. And for me, the last 10 years plus was like to create brands that are really meaningful. Like, for example, Dalay Istanbul 2 years ago at PCA, the booth was crowded from morning till closing time because there was this art, the Istanbul art, the Turkish tobacco, the story, the finished product that was like, we worked on that brand for 10 years. So that's something that I like to do, work with art and concepts and really put a brand out on, not just photocopy a cigar ring and slap a name on it, whatever it is, and then run with it. So, and I think that's what I said a little earlier. The younger, well-educated customer, they want the real stories. They either want something very inexpensive, a 6x60, supposedly long filler for like 3-4 euros. That cigar doesn't need a story or whatever. But if you want to spend time with a handmade cigar and spend money on it, then it should be worthwhile. And that's what we try to educate, like since starting our YouTube channel, is like, instead of smoking 10 $2 cigars a day, smoke one $20 cigar that means something, that like will give you a good time and a good experience and good tobacco. And that's and I see that happening even with younger customers who spend like more money that you would think they would do.
Earlier, Ernie, you made an excellent point about allocating resources, production capacities with an ever-evolving international market, opening new audiences, opening new countries. Of course, there has to be a very strategic plan being put into place in order to not only create a one and done hype, but to truly establish long-term success and loyalty amongst your consumer base and your customers. And that probably goes to all of you, Ernie, Claudio, Christian, and Salih, of course, in regards to the manufacturing side. How do you think about allocating those resources, whether it's the availability of great quality raw material, but also labor, of course, which we know is definitely a shortage these days, particularly in Nicaragua, but also in Honduras and in the Dominican. How do you make sure that once you develop these new markets and once you open those opportunities, you can stay true to that commitment and continue that growth trajectory?
Yeah, so for us, I mean, we have a relatively small factory. We do, our capacity is around 4 million cigars per year, and we more or less want to stay in that range, so not get much bigger than that. So when we entered international more seriously, we were very methodical in terms of starting, very serious with 5 markets, kind of building it little by little. And I think now we've hit a nice kind of run rate where we expect to grow, incrementally. We don't expect to have this massive growth from here. And, one thing that my family believes, and I know Christians, we've had this conversation many times, is we hold very huge stocks of tobacco. It's very capital intensive, but at the end of the day, it's critical. We believe in aging the tobacco for a very long time. So I would say for the most part, we have close to 3 years of tobacco for most of our blends. So we try, we really believe in consistency. Again, I know this is something I've talked to Christian a lot about, and his family's been in the forefront of a lot of these things. So I think we're in a good position. I think it's just a matter of, again, being cautious and not getting, too aggressive. And I think we're in a very good spot. One thing I have noticed from international, and I'm curious to get the thoughts of the rest of the panel, is even 3 years ago, it was much more about, hey, you have this one brand, I love it, and, let's keep that supply. It does seem to be gravitating to some degree similar to Yes Market, where product innovation has become very important. And, people are constantly asking for new things. We try to tackle that with limited editions. We're doing some regional editions as well. But like I said, I think in our case, we're just very methodical, making sure whatever promises we make to our distributors, we can keep them and not get to the point that we can't, meet the demand that they have.
Ernie, I think you touched on something really interesting, right? So here we have a bunch of operations where 99% of our sales were always in the United States. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden, we start selling into Europe, and each market is asking us for something a little different. Because at first, we're like the guest, right? It's just the foot in the door. So I remember, for example, Asylum. Asylum was a 50-count box. Mm-hmm. But France wants a 16-count box. Mm-hmm. And Sweden wants it in 24, for example. I don't remember. But we had 3 or 4 different packages. Which, of course, we'll bend to whatever the market wants because we're just trying to penetrate. But something's been happening lately. I mean, the homogenization of, don't make me say that word twice, right? So markets are homogenized. And all of a sudden, all the different markets are beginning to accept packaging as is. Mm-hmm. Because as there's a certain cost to get into a market. We don't mind changing the box, changing this to get into the market. But when you start moving, the volume starts increasing. And now Europe turns into about 20% of our sales. We start realizing that the cost involved in making these different types of boxes and packaging, it starts becoming not prohibitive, but not as profitable, right? Mm-hmm. So we begin to talk to our customers and say, listen, I need the boxes to be 25 count worldwide. And surprisingly, customers are like, listen, it's okay. So we start noticing that the only difference now in the way we make cigars from Europe or United States or Asia is the space for those stupid warning labels that you have all over Europe. Because every country has to have a different type of restriction on that stupid warning label. Yep. Is it on top? Is it on the bottom? Is it 66%? Is it 33%? But beside that, everything now begins to be the same thing, the same blend. I mean, we do have to change the names on some products. For example, we use Habano. Here in the U.S., over there is Criollo, and in France is Orange, because the French are the French, right? They want their own thing all the time. But beside that, we do notice that we're able to operate the same. However, we do have very serious challenges as far as getting the product in the full portfolio over to our customers.
Mm-hmm.
The factory is only 2 or 3 days away from a container from Miami, but you're talking about weeks to Europe. So getting the full portfolio is a challenge for us. Finding the right warehousing partner, all these things are all important, and I think that's the next stage and what you're seeing happening now in Europe. And of course, track and trace just completely changed everything and really limited the amount of distributors that you can use. So, but how do we better service our retail customers and our wholesale distributors is really the challenge. Not so much in tobacco and things like this, because I think we're finding our cigars are widely accepted now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing I have noticed, and we have a pretty diverse portfolio of milder cigars, more full body cigars. And whereas in the US, our full body cigars tend to sell the best, international, our milder cigars sell much better, which that has been a learning experience for us. We're fortunate, Reinhard, Jorge Luis Fernandez, Mikey, that works with us. He spent most of his career at Habanos, and he's been an enormous asset. But from day one, he told us, look, the palate international, it's different than what you guys are used to in the US. And like Christian said, we are seeing some kind of meeting in the middle. But currently, our best sellers international tend to be on the milder side. And the other thing that we find, the complexity is very, very important. And I talked to a lot of end consumers, and they'll have their notes of the first third, the second third, and the final third of the cigar. And it's awesome. It's awesome to see that.
Now, for one, the logistic elements aside, how much do you factor in those different taste profiles or differences in consumer behavior in how you offer your range of product to the international markets? Or even when you start thinking about a new product, when you create a new blend, how much impetus do you put on keeping in mind the various different taste profiles that you see all across the board and all across the world?
I would say that plays a bigger part when we're doing something like a regional edition, where it's specific for a market, and they're obviously, we work closely with the distributor to figure out what they think works the best in their market. And typically, we'll start with, hey, your Encore blend is something that I enjoy, that my customers enjoy, and we want to stay kind of in that profile. But in terms of when we do the blends, my dad, he's a fanatic when it comes to this stuff. And to be honest, I think for him, the most important thing is to make sure that he feels proud with the blend. He loves the blend. We just recently finalized, Reinhard, our Perez-Carrillo Endure, which we're using a Merrifield Cameroon wrapper in that line. And it took 32 blends for him to finally finalize one. So once you start getting that far deep into it. But I do think, kind of staying more in that medium body, you're going to appeal to a wider range of people.
Claudio, you've worked with some very obscure tobaccos, even Italian tobacco recently. How do you think about that?
I want to resume a little bit of what Christian and Ernesto said with a quote that is very rhetoric, very basic, but I learned that from one of my mentors, and it always been working for me in my entire career. It's think global, act local. There is different meanings on that, okay? Because of course, in the evolution of the markets, the products, cigars, or quantity in the boxes, and all those things. So you got to have your identity as a company, as a brand, but then when you are going to travel, you understand, and if you don't, you will not understand it. You understand that each market is different. Okay, each market is different, and each market is difficult because we are in an industry that is extremely regulated. We are a kind of a blue zone, a nice spot in the United States. And I think about Europe with the new regulations, it's even worse. So you have to have, if you want, the mindset that you make it the cigars as you know how to want. You put your signature on, but then you are not going, and I quote the other quote, you are not going to sell cigars. The people are buying. People is buying cigars. We are not selling cigars. I think we are. I had a tough conversation with one of my clients because he said, I want to sell. I want to sell. I want to sell. I'm like, you're not selling cigars. The others are buying the cigars from you. If you understand that, yes. Otherwise, change job and go be a lawyer or something else. Because of the difference of the markets, even selling cigars is different. Okay, and we jeopardize events. We did a lot of mistakes. Okay, take the United States for 20 years, buy 3 get 1. That was the worst thing. They ruined the U.S. market. I mean, it ruined the U.S. market. Go to France, go to Europe. If it's not a nice restaurant with a beautiful menu, there are no cigars around. So you give that extra plus something special to cigars that the people can appreciate more instead of, if I buy a box, can I have this for free? No, you cannot have for free because we work so hard. We spend so much money and it's expensive because we have to have 3, 4, 5 years of wrappers and fillers to face the production in 3 years. And in 3 years, maybe we grow production, so we have to find those tobaccos that we already piled in our warehouse. So it's a very complex equation, selling cigars, or better said, the people buying cigars. Okay, and in all this evolution that we had in the last, for me, the best example to watch the cigar industry is starting 15 years ago. Okay, kudos to Drew Estate. Why? Because in the United States, it brought millions of new smokers. What kind of smokers? It doesn't matter. For the first time, they had a cigar. Flavored, not flavored, good, picadura, long filler, limited edition, it doesn't matter. They put in the mouth a cigar. Then our job to have those new guys to buy our cigars, not to sell them. Okay? Maybe I'm too much European on these things, but I think the fact of buying cigars from someone, it's you make him loyal. When he's there and he says, I want to buy a CLE, I want to buy an Ernesto Perez-Carrillo, I want to buy a cigar from Salih, right? I experienced that in Europe. I experienced that. I went to China 7 times. You know how we sell cigars? You want to laugh? I'll tell you how we sell cigars in China. You have to have a dinner. You have a round table. You have to drink a lot. And if you don't get aggressive, if you are honest, if you are a nice guy, they are going to buy the cigars from you. Otherwise, there is no way you can sell one cigar because of the blend, because of the box, because of the ring. And that's one of the examples. Okay? And after 7 years, I was exhausted of those dinners. But again, locally, every market is different and they smoke differently. Okay? Go to Spain. Spain, they want cigars that they are cheap. Everybody says that. It's not true. It's not true. Okay? Go to Switzerland. In Switzerland, it doesn't matter the price. They want quality. They're going to be humidity at the right temperature and humidity. The box, everything got to be perfect. Okay? Go to Norway. Norway, you cannot give a 4x60. I was selling a 4.5 by 26. It was my best sale. And I was like, what? Can it possible? Yes. I didn't change the packaging. I didn't change the name. I didn't change the ring. I just adjusted about the expectation of each market. That's very difficult because, as Christian said, the French, no, I want the box like this. That. No, it's not possible. It's going to change the price. It's going to be more expensive and blah, blah, blah. And then when you change one thing, you have to wait the 6 months of the registration, the change of it. It is a nightmare. Export cigars outside of the United States, it is a nightmare. And now it's getting worse. But if you think local, you can be more than successful. You got to get that key of the market. Could be the distributor. It could be your policy of the company. It could be your pricing. It could be who's selling cigars in the streets, not only the distributor. but the guy, because remember, this is an industry, we shake hands. We know each other, okay? We know the faces.
Excellent.
It's interesting what you said. It's interesting what you said. If I may interject, Reinhard, it's interesting what you said about selling and thinking local and all of that stuff. When we were recruiting the people for our team, for our sales team, we always shied away from anybody that had any cigar experience, because what we wanted to do is to train that individual and make that individual so polished in terms of presenting the cigars, and in terms of really giving the story and the details of that cigars, the wrapper, the binder, the filler, the experience you go through it. So if you look at the people, so as much as we focused on the education of our clients, we focused first and foremost on the education, on the training of our team. And you look at our team today, our top performers, you'd be shocked. One is a coffee sommelier, the other is a wine sommelier, and the third is a perfume sommelier, if I may call it that much. You stand with a perfume sommelier and he talks to you about aroma like it was his mother.
Education.
With the
education, right?
education, and the whole thing that people are obsessed by, which is the pairing. And if I'm going to drink this, what am I going to smoke with it? And if I'm going to smoke that, what am I going to drink with it? There is a perception, if I go back to Ernesto's point, there's a perception, because our part of the world was predominantly Cuban smokers and Cuban cigars, apart from a few and far in between Maduro editions, that this part of the world is more into the lighter cigars. But our humble experiences with over 40 brands and over 900 SKUs that are currently available in our shop is that people love medium to full strength or body, depends on what you're talking about. There's a huge market, definitely, for lighter to medium cigars, but we've seen a huge shift to full-bodied cigars lately, or full-strength cigars.
Also, right, on that point, information nowadays travels so quickly, and we know
Correct.
that in the international markets, all these consumers also listen to the podcasts, read Half Wheel, hopefully tune in to the International Policy Summit and the content that the PCA is producing here as well. Salih, you're facing end consumers every single day. Would you second that thought that nowadays, even a lot of the German end consumers take inspiration from what's happening in the United States because they read these blogs, because they listen to those podcasts and video shows?
Wow. Man, from my experience, that's just a small portion. It's like the people in the stores, the sales reps, the manufacturers, the distributors are much more important compared to awards and things like that. It's like it doesn't transform. And I mean, we are a rather small city. We are not Munich, Düsseldorf, Cologne. With us, it's like the salespeople in the store can direct the customer, and it's very rarely that somebody comes in and says, "Man, I heard this cigar had this rating. Let's go with it." It's and even the American success transforms hardly to Germany. If somebody is not coming, not traveling, if there are no events happening, it doesn't matter how successful that cigar is in the States. It's like it's still tough. So,
my God, it's totally the opposite here. It's very challenging to my team, because people are so on top of the ratings. They read the magazines. Look, we've been distributing Cigar Journal, for example, for the longest time, and we never sold it. We actually gave it away, and people read and are very much like the US kind of client that walks into your shop and asks you what's new. They want to understand the rating. They want to understand the story. They come having done their homework. Some of them come with their phones, with their lists. Do you have this? Do you have this? I'm dying to try this. Oh my God, you have the Andalusian Bull. I've been on a waiting list for the past, I don't know what. etc., etc. So we're very lucky and challenged simultaneously by the kind of a client base that's a very educated client base that we have in this part of the world.
Yeah, but talking internationally, I mean, I have quite a few Asian customers, and it's still to this day it's 99% Cuban cigars, and then you have some Davidoff, some Fuente, and that's about it. It's like most of the other brands, customers they don't know about, they don't. I mean, they're not smoking. They're buying for somebody else. They're traveling. They're grabbing whatever they can. So getting a brand name out internationally, that's a huge challenge.
Salih, let me say something. It's very interesting. This about social media, podcast, advertising, and all that stuff. Marketing and advertising is the life of a brand. We cannot deny that. It is like that, even in cigars. Different industry, I would say cigar industry is different, but we gotta do that. We can reach people with social media and advertising that we cannot reach directly on our websites or in the shops, okay? You mentioned Asia, which is a very young market. They are not used to podcast, to the cigar journal, Cigar Aficionado magazine, and all that stuff. It is coming because, like 25 years ago in Europe, nobody knew Cigar Aficionado. Everybody knows now Cigar Aficionado or other magazines. So, if you want, it's a geographical trip from west to east. Started from the United States, going through Europe, and now it's moving to Europe. So, it is always very important to have that. What's my problem with all this now? How many good podcasts are made? People that are really prepared, really educated about cigars. How many magazines are looking at the market, are looking at the brands in a way that, it is their job to show them independently. So the problem of social media, podcasts, and magazines, it is not that we don't need them. Yes, we need them. But which one of those we need? Because today, if you click Google podcast about cigars, oh my God, I don't know. Maybe in India there is a podcast about cigars. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's perfect. It's education. The problem is the problem is the quality of the education they are doing. Because I talked with a couple of guys doing podcasts, and recently, I cannot name it, from England, and he goes like, Claudio, can you explain me this, and that? And I'm like, why you need that? And I'm gonna make my podcast, blah blah blah. And I'm like, it took me 25 years to learn certain things about cigars, and now in a WhatsApp message, you think you can make a podcast on a very, very technical thing about cigars. I'm like, no, sorry, that's my job. I'm a consultant. If you want to pay a consultancy, and I give you all the information.
It's very good points that you made, and taking all of that into consideration, I think it shows how diverse, in a beautiful way, the international cigar market is, how fragmented in many different ways, and also the challenges ahead, and the work that we all still have to do in order to educate the people out there and to speak to different audiences, not in a different language, but with subtle nuances and certain things that strike familiar with the people, depending on whether you're in Europe, in the Middle East, in Africa, Southeast Asia, or in the US, which for a lot of people still is of course, the number one market and sort of the promised land of cigars. Gentlemen, coming towards the end of our wonderful panel, even though I feel we could go on for hours and hours discussing these things.
Can I interrupt you for the last thing, very last thing, and then
of course.
I don't talk anymore. The Italians, they talk anymore.
I'll still have a final question for you, though.
Because talking about education and all those things, our mistake was we let the same dictionary of wine to be translated in cigars. So,
very true.
10 years, 15 years ago, when, these people were smoking cigars, the first thing was using the dictionary of wine. Okay? Why? Because it was the only one we knew. The cigars have a different dictionary while smoking, while making cigars, while processing tobacco, and the other thing. And I'm seeing, fortunately, slowly, we are adopting our own dictionary, which is not very different than wine, right? But there is major things that they are very different than wine that need to be told to everybody to have that difference and to create even more education.
Could you give us just a few simple examples of what exactly you're referring to, or feel those key differences lie?
Oh, yeah. The most stupid thing, difference between taste and aromas. Well, like, can you taste or you are savoring a cigar? They don't know the difference. It's the most basic thing. I mean, you combine taste and aromas, you are savoring a cigar. And when I say that, it's like, oh yeah, it's true. But it's so basic, okay? It's so elementary that we forget to say those things. So the people is just like, oh, the dry fruits that they are very ripped of, whatever. I smell a pine from Sweden. I'm like, man, you gotta be very good to make the difference between a pine from Finland and Sweden. We went a little bit too far, again, because of the problem of education about cigars.
Reinhard, I just want to add something, and it's not in line of what my dear friend Claudio here was saying, but if we go back to the topic of this session, I just want to mention a couple of things that are very important with regards to the international markets and differentiating them. There's a whole aspect of you mentioned earlier something about the challenging, your capacity to import and the process of importation. You have countries within the let me talk to the Middle East because that's the area that I know the most. You have countries till today that are incapable, the laws don't permit you to import. The other thing is the taxation. Taxation is a big thing that differentiates many of the international markets and their capacity to sell. You have people from the US coming into one of my shops and saying, oh my God, this is crazy. And you tell them, yeah, you have a compounded tax rate of about 250%, very similar to what's being applied, for example, in the UK or Australia. So these are very important differentiations that people have to basically put in their mind vis-a-vis the capacities and the ability of different markets to grow. We here are very lucky. We're in the UAE. I register, import, receive my shipments behind my computer screen. I don't have to speak to a single customs agent. Everything's automated, payment, everything, what have you. A lot of other countries, it is not the same thing. And this is not something that we only as importers, whether be it on the retail, wholesale, or distribution, are suffering from. Even the distributors themselves. You talk to Christian, you talk to Carrillo, Ernesto, they have problems to meeting all the demands and the requirements of the different countries and how to supply to them. And so while their business is growing, their headaches is catapulting as their business is growing because they have to meet the requirements of those different countries. I just wanted to mention this because this is very important as far as the international market is concerned, because a lot of people from the US don't realize those certain nuances as far as these markets are concerned.
Right, you perfectly paved the way, and you gave me the perfect segue into my final question and how I would like to wrap things up. Indeed, challenges aplenty in the international market when it comes to the importation, taxation, warning labels were mentioned earlier. There's a whole plethora of things that make it much more challenging to sell cigars in the international markets compared to the United States. At the same time, organizations like the PCA are trying to extend their global footprint, create a better flow of information about all these regulatory issues and challenges that the manufacturers are facing in order to make it easier for everybody to overcome those hurdles. My question to all of you, and please pack it into your final statement for today. What do you think we as an industry can do better in terms of the flow of information, in terms of sharing our resources, sharing our knowledge, sharing our expertises when it comes to those challenges, not only on the manufacturing, marketing, or product-related front, but also when it comes to regulatory issues? What can we all do better to grow the global cigar community and make sure that these emerging markets and very interesting markets will in fact become a major part of global cigar distribution, consumption, and enjoyment moving forward?
Right. That's a really good question. I'll take it first because it's been biting my tongue here about this subject. Every time I travel, I cannot understand why in Europe we simply, and no one's been able to explain to me, so it's completely out of ignorance on my side. I can't understand why whenever governments put up a regulation, it's just accepted and that's it. There's no fight. Now, everybody tells me that that's the way things are and that's the way governments function. But there has to be a way. Maybe there's a way we can do it in steps. Maybe the first thing is to get a definition for premium cigars. All right. So I was just in Croatia trying to get that part of that concept thrown in there. If we can separate ourselves from cigarettes, number one. Number two, if we can change the way that the governments look at us and the way cigars get taxed, I think it changes the dynamic of our industry. You get really good markets like France and Spain. These guys have 7, 8, 8.5% fixed margins, no advertising. It's only a matter of time before somebody inherits those stores, and then next generation is like, listen, man, that's a stupid side of the business. I don't want anything to do with it, and they get rid of cigars. All right, so we're very fortunate that we have a lot of passionate people that love this business, but there has to be a better way that we can reach out to all the different governments. We all have embassies. These are all small countries, Honduras, Dominican, Nicaragua. They're all countries that Europe wants to help develop. And these are leading industries from our countries. There has to be a way we can start. And I don't know what the answer is. I'm just basically complaining into the wind. Hopefully if somebody listens. But there has to be a way we can get organized. But, if companies like STG, really, really good, successful, well-organized companies, and companies like Davidoff that are also very well organized and important in their local governments, if they too have been unsuccessful reaching the governments, I don't know what the answer is. I just think that maybe there could be a combined effort. I don't know what the plan is, but this should be one of our focuses, I think, or really our main focus.
Christian, that's an excellent point and a very important call to action. And, sessions like ours today and what the PCA is hosting with the International Policy Summit, I think is an important step in that direction. But in fact, it's making sure that the rubber meets the road and that we put these things in place and come together, try to speak with one voice in order to fight some of these very challenging regulatory aspects and move forward in a positive direction. Thank you for sharing that. Right. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off.
No, not at all. Lobbying is very important. I mean, to summarize what Christian is saying, if we are to put it in one word, there has to be local lobbies in the different countries. Obviously, having something like PCA extending into our part of the world and using the amount of experience and knowledge and technique, if you may, that they've been doing in the US and their coordination with Cigar Rights of America and what have you. These are things we've never experienced. If we bring that to our part of the world, it's a brilliant thing. It's exactly like when CNN came for the first time, or when whatever, Oreos came for the first time, for the lack of a better example. People get to start understanding how things function, how things work together. When we first got into this business and doing cigars, people thought we were mad. Today, we're very humbled to say that the Leaf Master, when it landed in the UAE, there was like one other cigar shop that did not even handle New World cigars. Today, you have over 10 or 15 different cigar shops, the majority of which sell New World cigars or non-Cuban cigars. You have over 40 to 50 lounges all over, and it continues. So the intention is there, but the collaboration and the lobbying of a single force that talks from one authority, if you may, vis-a-vis the governments, is the most important thing. And I couldn't agree more with Christian. Now, why do we accept what governments want? Well, it's not the same in different countries, but anyways.
Salih, over to you.
I think one good point would be like to get the premium handmade cigar up there with the Scottish single malt whiskey, the champagne, like just the word has to ring a bell with customers that this is a certified premium, originated from wherever it comes. I think that's very important to differentiate between machine-made cigarillos and mass consumption, and like again, history, the myths about the handmade product. We have to be side by side, like I said, with like champagne and single malt Scots whiskey that rings a bell with every customer.
Excellent point. Ernie, what's your thoughts on this?
Yeah, one thing that I think would have been helpful for us early on is, to Raid's point in terms of taxation in different countries, we kind of started going after international pretty aggressively. You're juggling a lot of balls at the same time, and you don't realize all these countries have, in some cases, dramatic, differences in taxation. And your cigar that may be $13 in the U.S. ends up being $30 in some markets. And, obviously that's not the intention. So I think, if the PCA perhaps could lead, and I'm sure this information is out there, but something where you can get better insights in terms of taxation by countries, I think is something to be very helpful to all manufacturers as you price your products.
Claudio,
I want to be the black,
statement is all yours.
I want to be the black sheep.
Nothing new there.
And I want to use a little bit of my political sciences background to analyze quickly a couple of things. First problem, a lobby. Even the word lobby, in many countries, we don't know what it means. It means talking a group of companies or something with the government. We don't know the art of lobbying. And that's a huge disadvantage for Europe, okay? Another problem is we say Europe, but Europe it's a very, very young country. We cannot even define country. It's a group of different countries with 25 different languages, 25 different histories, 25 different cultures. So everybody has his own way to work, okay? Remember that even 20 years ago, in most of those countries, there were the monopoly of state. Monopoly of state means it was the state owning import, distribution, and everything about tobacco. Even salt in Italy. Yes, the monopoly of salt. Imagine that. But the worst is, it is a product where the taxes are so high, so they cannot let something where the revenues are so huge, to go in a path, then they are going to lower the taxes, they are going to free all the distribution and all those things. So put together all the 27 different countries of Europe, I'm taking the example only of Europe, and put all those problems to the central office, then now you have to be registered as a manufacturer. Each cigar, you have to get a code, and that code, the European code, you give to each of the distributors in 27 countries, and they have to make in each of the country the registration with different timing, different cost, different BS, and all that stuff. Not only that, now track and trace. You know how much it costs the software for a distributor to have the track and trace in-house? 80,000 euros. Do you think a poor guy in, I don't know, a very small country, I don't want to name anybody, can buy only a software to track and trace that? So we're going to face even more problem. The taxation on tobacco in Europe is the same kind of taxation you have on gasoline and you have in other products. So forget that they're going to lower the taxes. It's impossible. It is impossible. What we can do, it is supporting the distributors, okay? Organizing the distributors in a way that there is, I saw already someone in Europe organized so he can do the job for different countries. And we gotta go around that problem. We cannot face the problem and saying, okay, guys, this is wrong, we gotta change this. They are not going to change that because put together 27 countries and put together them in an office in Brussels. You know what is going to happen? I can tell you what is going to happen. It's going to happen the same thing after World War II. Where in Europe, the only place you can find good cigars in Europe, where was that?
So you're saying there's a chance?
Switzerland.
There's a lot of hope in that statement.
It was Switzerland. You know why? It's not part of the Europe. So you're going to have Switzerland, you're going to have Andorra, you're going to have San Marino, you're going to have Liechtenstein, you're going to have maybe Luxembourg, maybe, but I think Luxembourg is more into Europe than Liechtenstein. Those are going to be hubs for, I don't want to say what, because I cannot picturing it so far, but in each of the countries, I already have a client. In Italy, they said, Claudio, maybe I'm out of business. I'm like, if you're out of business, I'm out of business too. No, I'm losing you. No, I don't want to lose you. Because he started 3 years ago. He's a very small guy, and now he cannot face the cost of track and trace. What he can do, I do not have the answer right now, but it's going to be an even worse challenging timing in the next 3 to 5 years in Europe.
I think, Claudio, to summarize, what it's going to take is a lot of effort and energy and people working together, sharing their resources, their expertise, and their knowledge in order to fight against some of these things. Stay united and stay together. And ultimately, I think we can all end on a positive note and a very hopeful note that seeing the growth and the excitement around premium cigars amongst younger consumers and in the international markets is definitely something that we need to build on to, and that we need to cherish and keep that flame alive, and not just keeping it alive, but truly enlarging it and making it a beautiful, very impactful thing and a global movement for the continued growth and success of the premium cigar industry. Gentlemen, I want to thank you wholeheartedly for being part of this panel about the international cigar markets, the international cigar community, emerging cigar markets. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to have you, Christian Eiroa, Claudio Sgroi, Ernesto Perez-Carrillo III, Reinhard joining us from Dubai for the Leaf Masters, and Salih Dalay coming to us from Germany. Thank you very, very much. Many thanks to the PCA for organizing the International Policy Summit, with Joshua and his wonderful team. Thanks for having us, and to all of you, have a wonderful rest of your day and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you all, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.